Okay, this is English 201, Week 2, Part 1. Welcome back. I hope you survived your first week of class. Um, I am, last week, I taught you everything, basically everything you need to know to deal with this class. I introduced the idea of the five key terms, which we're going to be using all semester. And I went over four of them. I went over summary, metaphor, irony, and theme. And those really are the four important ones. There's a fifth one that I'm going to talk about today that I'm going to teach you about, and then you're probably never going to mention. You can pass the whole class without ever talking about this fifth term, but I like to teach it. I think it's important for people that can handle it. But summary, metaphor, irony, and theme is how you are going to do the semester. I'm going to give you a short story. We're going to go over a poem by Shakespeare. I'm going to give you a short story by Kafka. I'm going to give you two more Shakespeare plays, and you're going to be using summary, metaphor, irony, and theme to talk about what you are reading, and that's the class. There's a little bit on research but it's repetitive of what you learned about research in 101. It's just the same stuff. So you'll have to quote things in your papers that you found yourself that are worth quoting in a college paper. We'll go over that later. But basically, these four key terms is the entire semester, just literally practicing. And I could have picked anything for us to practice the five key terms on, and I picked Kafka's Metamorphosis and Othello and the Tempest plus the Phoenix and the Turtle. So whatever, those are the things that I'm going with. Um, so yeah, so what I want to do next is actually just look at a Shakespeare poem, an incredibly, insanely bonkers difficult Shakespeare poem, just so that you can have one poem on one page where you can see all of the five key terms working before we head into looking at individual stories or individual works of art. So, but before I do that, I'm going to introduce the fifth and final key term. So just to review real quick, summary, which is paying attention to understand what's happening to the characters in the story, which can be as simple as this guy stabbed this other guy in the face with a sword, but could also be as complex as the psychological motivations about why he did that. And we talked about metaphor, which is when there's two different things and the similarities are emphasized. So metaphor takes two different things and compares them and says what's similar about them. Sometimes you have to figure out what's similar about them. Sometimes you have to figure out what's being compared, but that's metaphor. Irony is contrast. If metaphor is similarity, irony is contrast. It's the opposite. It's about opposites. Irony is when two things do not go together or are the opposite of each other. And that can be as simple as, what I said is the opposite of what I meant. It's sarcasm. And then we talked about theme. Theme is ideas. It's kind of like the lesson or point. It's the idea. It's like the philosophical idea. Most works of art have some kind of philosophical idea. Most of them are dumb. Sometimes they're just really simple stuff like love wins every time, which, okay, it's a fine thing. And I have no problem seeing some are blockbusters. But, life is more complicated than that. Anyway. So the last key term that I want to talk about, introduce real quick, is sound. Now, when my students hear sound, usually what they think of is like tone of voice, like this guy sounds angry or this guy sounds sad. Tone of voice is actually part of summary. Tone of voice is something like if you were summarizing, that's back in summary. So and tone of voice can be tricky. Obviously, when you're talking to someone or watching a movie, it's pretty easy to tell what their tone of voice is. But when you're reading a play, or reading a novel, you have to kind of guess what the tone of voice is. And so that's summary. Like, I think this character is probably shouting this part, or I think this character is probably saying this very quietly. But there's all kinds of different ways. People will do that. We're doing Shakespeare, and there'll be a speech in Shakespeare, and you can go see two different plays of two different actors doing the same speech, and one of them will deliver the thing shouting and screaming, and the other person will angrily whisper it. And it's like a very, so tone of voice is something, it's complicated. Actors will decide how to interpret what tone of voice is called for. But when I say, the fifth term is sound, but sound is not tone of voice. Tone of voice is back with summary. Sound is tricky. Sound is, and this is why I don't spend a lot of time on it. The reason I teach it, now you're probably wondering, if we're not spending a lot of time on it, why am I teaching it to you at all? I'm a poetry guy, and sound's really important for poetry. I read a lot of poetry. I read mostly poetry. And sound's important in poetry, and I like to take it seriously. And we're going to be doing Shakespeare. Shakespeare, even the plays, are quite poetic. And so it's very important to me that you at least are aware of what sound is as a thing. And then, but I'll never answer, I'm not going to test you on it. I'm not going to quiz you on it. You will not be required to talk about it. But if you want to, you can. So let's talk about sound real quick. Sound is real simple. Many of you actually already know the basics of sound. It's rhythm and rhyme. The first thing I want you to notice about sound is that it is something put in there in the poem, usually in a poem. It's put in there by the author for you, the audience. Usually characters in a story can't hear that. So for example, if you're watching, so Shakespeare characters will talk to each other in a kind of poetry. Sometimes they'll even rhyme. But you'll never, ever, ever in the play will somebody be like, dude, that's crazy, that just rhymed. They can't hear that. That's the way it's something Shakespeare puts in. Shakespeare has the characters rhyme for us, the audience, but the characters don't like know they're rhyming. You'll see this in Shakespeare, and I'll talk about this more in detail. But there's like a rhythm to the speech. The characters can't hear that. If they could hear it, they'd be like, "Wow, that's really crazy! How that's exactly the same syllable stresses in a pattern." Like they can't hear that. That's for us, the audience, from the writer, from Shakespeare. Okay, so let's talk about sound. It's rhythm and rhyme, and there's some other things to it too. But when you think about sound, the main way to think about it is rhythm and rhyme. So let's talk about sound. I have a PowerPoint presentation here, but there's a very easy way I could put the PowerPoint on screen and talk over it, and I don't feel like learning because I don't know. I don't want to teach online. I want to be back in person. And so as a result, I'm extremely resistant to learning how to do this correctly because I'm not planning on doing this for very long. As soon as I can get back in a physical classroom, I'm never teaching online again. So instead of doing it the right way, I have my iPad out and I'm just going to film that. But if you want to see the PowerPoint, I put it up on the website. So, okay, let's take a look at sound. So rhythm and rhyme. No pain, no gain. Some of you said that after I said that. No pain, no gain. This is a phrase. It's often used as part of gym culture, but also other people do it too. But it's a really simple idea. No pain, no gain. It just means that you got to work hard to get a reward, right? No pain, no gain. But the thing I want you to notice about it is, let's talk about the purpose of rhythm and rhyme. The purpose of rhythm and rhyme, and I'm thinking mostly, and this presentation, by the way, is about poetry. This is a poetry presentation. Now, there's a lot of poetry in Shakespeare, even though it's a play. The characters talk like a poem. Many characters talk like it's a poem all the time, and I'll get to that when I get to Shakespeare. But no pain, no gain. Please notice, with no pain, no gain, there's two things that are happening there. Number one, it's memorable. Rhythm and rhyme make things memorable. If the phrase was, there is no success without suffering, people wouldn't remember that. They wouldn't quote it. It wouldn't be quotable. But when I say no pain, everybody goes, no gain, because they know it. And the reason they know it is because it's memorable. And the reason it's memorable is because it has a rhythm to it. No pain, no gain. Bum ba 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 ba. Weak strong, weak strong. No pain, no gain. It has a rhythm that makes it memorable. Also, it has rhyme. Pain rhymes with gain. So when you combine these two things, rhyme and rhythm together, you get a little tiny phrase like no pain, no gain. That makes it, it has two things. Number one, it makes it memorable. And number two, and this is ridiculous, but it is true, it makes it sound true. People think things that have rhythm and rhyme must be true. We love little rhyming phrases. It makes things sound true. Whereas if you said there can be no success without suffering, you'd be like, is that true? This guy seems really depressed. But if I say no pain, no gain, they're like, oh yeah, no pain, no gain. Like people believe that it's true because it has rhythm and rhyme. Okay, so that's the end of the first video, and we'll keep going, and I'm going to give you a bunch of examples and talk about this at length. And this is a presentation on sound. See you in the next video.